In this video, we are going to learn how to complete the square. Now, if x squared plus bx is not part of a perfect square trinomial, you can use that coefficient for b to find a particular constant c so that this x squared plus bx plus c is a perfect square trinomial. Now, when you do this, you are completing the square, meaning you are creating a perfect square trinomial. So a little visual of how this works. We're going to do this little pathway, and I'll show you how we take this kind of rectangle, rearrange it, find a piece to add on to it that makes it a perfect square rather than a rectangle. So we're starting off with x squared plus bx. So that's x times x, which is x squared for that big piece right here. And this red piece over here would be b times x. Now, if I take that rectangle in red and cut it in half, I can get two of these rectangles to be half of bx and half of bx. But this will still be x by x. So this leaves me with x squared and still plus bx, but now I'll have this extra piece up here. So now this little piece, to make it fit, this has to be b over 2, that side. And that other side over here needs to also be b over 2. So what we're adding is another square, which would be b over 2 times b over 2, which would be b over 2 squared. Which now, that piece, when I add onto this square here, I have a perfect square again, with this side being x, that side being x, and with this little piece right here being b over 2. And therefore, I've created a perfect square binomial, because I'll put x plus b over 2 squared. So you'll see how I just kind of rearranged and then found the piece I needed to add on to make it a perfect square. So what this usually looks like is if you can form a perfect square trinomial from x squared plus bx just by adding b over 2 squared. And when you do that, it can factor into x plus b over 2 squared. Now let's show you how this works. So right now, my b is -10. And if I plug that into this equation down here, I'll get -10 over 2 squared, which would be -5 squared, which is 25. So if I add this on to this quadratic, this is now a perfect square trinomial, known as x plus -10 over 2 squared. -10 over 2 is -5, so that gives me x minus 5 squared, which makes total sense. Because now if I were to take x and square it, I get x squared, -5 and square it, I get positive 25. If I multiply our two terms together, it's -5x. Twice of that is the middle term. So that's how we've completed the square. So as long as I have x squared and some bx, I can find a number that will complete the square. So for this next one, I see that b is 6. So when I do my b over 2 squared, I'll have 6 over 2 squared, also known as 3 squared, which is 9. So if I add on 9, that will equal x plus b, 6 over 2 squared, which is known as x plus 3. And again, you can double check this because x squared is x squared, 3 squared is 9, that 3 times x is 3x, and twice of that is 6x. Now let's try this one more. So right now, b is -3. And then when I go to find b over 2 squared, that's going to be -3 over 2 squared, which is 9/4. So I need to add 9/4. But when I go to make my perfect square trinomial, it'll be x plus -3/2, b over 2 squared, which is x minus 3/2 squared. So this one's a little more unfamiliar, but it does work because if I square the x squared. If I square -3/2, that is positive 9/4. And if I multiply these two together, I get -3/2 x, which twice of that would be -3x. And that is how you complete the square.